This nugget is our second in the series on project scope management. The first nugget was on project scope definition, focused on collecting the requirements, defining the scope, and creating the WBS. This nugget is focused on the execution aspects of project scope management, where we're going to verify the scope and we're going to control the scope. Key component of the PMBOK guide and passing your PMP. Verify scope does not mean inspecting the work done by the project to ensure that it satisfies the scope requirements. Verifying scope in project management PMP terminology, PMBOK terminology, is all about ensuring the deliverables are accepted. And if you think about what verify scope defined in the PMBOK guide is ensuring deliverables are accepted, that in fact is exactly what I said a lot of people confer verifying the scope is making sure that the right work is being done. The difference being, the nuance being that the PMBOK, the PMP exam, interprets verifying the scope as meaning ensuring that the deliverables are accepted. It's key that you understand what verify scope means in terms of the PMBOK guide. So we will focus on what activities we must undertake to ensure that our deliverables are accepted, and we will also focus on the very important aspect of controlling the scope, and that's getting approval for all changes to the original project scope. One last comment before we get into this nugget is the terminology used. Verify scope and control scope. As we get into the nugget, you will see me using the words scope verification, and you will see me using the words scope control. That's simply because the rest of this nugget is based on or a repeat of the original PMP prep on the previous version, where the words were scope verification and scope control. But in fact, in this new version of the PMP, all that's changed is the name of the process group itself from scope verification to verify scope, and scope control to control scope. The intent of everything that happens inside these process areas is identical, and I want to bring that forward to help you gain your confidence that what you've already been doing for all these years in project management is still 100% applicable to the latest, newest version of the PMP exam itself. So let's get going. Scope verification is working with the stakeholders, working with the identified acceptor for each and every project deliverable, each and every project work product, to obtain formal acceptance of each deliverable. Scope verification does not happen once at the end of the project saying, the project is done, please formally accept the entire project. Scope verification happens throughout the project as each work product, as each deliverable is produced. It's working with the stakeholder, ensuring they are applying the appropriate measurement criteria. If you remember, we defined how each deliverable was going to be accepted. It's ensuring that the deliverable is accepted against that criteria. In a perfect world, and often projects are not delivered in perfect world, scope verification should be straightforward and automatic. You present a deliverable, a work product, to the acceptor. The acceptor reviews it and says, yes, this is done. Here's my signature. This is wonderful, thank you. That's often not the case. You often need to institute very formal, controlled processes to ensure the scope verification happens successfully and happens in a managed environment. The first step is you need to define a specific timeline. It needs to be reasonable, perhaps as long as 2 weeks, but preferably shorter. This means when you present a deliverable to the acceptor, you're saying, Here is the deliverable today. You have 2 weeks, 10 business days to review this deliverable and let me know if it is in fact acceptable. Let me know if in fact this deliverable meets your criteria. And then again, in a perfect world, the deliverable is accepted and the project can proceed. Often, projects will make mistakes and there will be remediation required for the deliverable. You'll have to fix the deliverable. You'll have to make adjustments to the deliverable. Then you need to have a defined turnaround process. This means if the acceptor used several independent reviewers to review the deliverable, you are expecting the acceptor to deliver a single set of comments. Nothing's worse for a project to get comments back from 3 or 4 reviewers and have the comments from the 3 or 4 reviewers conflict with each other. Reviewer number 1 says it should be black. Reviewer number 2 says it should be white. And reviewer number 3 says it should be gray. Well, you as a project manager don't have the subject matter expertise. You don't have the business knowledge to determine whether black, white, or gray is acceptable. So you need to have a defined turnaround process where the formally defined acceptor is responsible for consolidating the comments from the multiple reviewers and providing a single set of comments back for the revisions that's required. You need to have an interim acceptance process. What does that mean? Let's assume we produced a deliverable, a formal written document that has 5 sections in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on review, first pass, everybody read section number 1 and says that's fine. We have no comments on section number 1. Section number 2, there was 1 comment that needs fixing. Section number 3 was fine. Section number 4 was very wrong, is a total rewrite, and has to be totally reproduced. And section number 5 had 2 comments in it. Two small flaws that needed to be fixed. So our interim acceptance process is saying chapter number 1 is accepted. It's not open for further revision. If you have second thoughts, if on a second review or third review you want to change section number 1, it's literally too late. If you need to make changes after it's accepted, we'll deal with that with the next part in this nugget, which is change management. The same applies for section number 3. It is reviewed and it is accepted as is. Your team goes away and makes the revisions. You make the minor change to section number 2. You rewrite section number 4, and you make the 2 minor changes to section number 5, and you resubmit. As I said, at this point in time, sections 1 and 3 are not open for further change because sections 2 and section 5 were minor rewrites. The expectation is they will both be accepted this time because the only areas in section 2 and 5 that are open for further review, further acceptance, are the minor changes, and provided that your team did an acceptable job of making the minor changes, 2 and 5 should be accepted as is. And again, the only area open to change is if, in fact, they made a mistake in those very minor flaws. Only those minor flaws are again open for re-review and re-acceptance. Section number 4 gets reviewed this time, and again there are some minor flaws. This time there are 2 minor flaws, and the team goes away and reworks them. So again, you resubmit, but at this point in time, with your interim acceptance process, the only thing that's open for re-review are those 2 minor flaws in section number 4. You resubmit a second time, and again, assuming your team does an adequate job of correcting those minor flaws, at this point in time, the document is formally accepted. The importance of this interim review process, very much like the importance of getting a single set of comments, is it prevents change and rechange and rechange and rethink. If you made these first set of changes on the first submission and the whole document was open for review and revision, section number 1 may require changes this time, or section number 3 may require changes this time. So you make the changes, you resubmit, and somebody reviews it again and says, no, that's not quite right. I guess my first thoughts were correct. I should have went with my first intuition. It should be back to the way that it was. So therefore, again, absolutely insist on a single set of comments, absolutely insist on an interim acceptance process to move the process forward. Because oftentimes, your project can't proceed until this requirements definition document is complete. How can you start working on the next phase of your project design until the requirements are signed off? If you don't have an established timeline for acceptance, if you don't have an established turnaround process, if you don't have a process for moving the acceptance process forward, you can be in a vicious circle in scope verification, project acceptance, and simply spiral inwards or outwards depending on your definition of the vicious circle, making changes, changing it from black to white to gray, changing section 1, changing it back as you get into rethink. Deliver it, insist on a turnaround process to move the project forward, insist on the interim acceptance process, and your project will move forward and the project will be able to complete. As I said, if there are changes, if once you put the interim process in place and the business wants to rethink section 1, section 3, or rethink the entire document after it's formally acceptance, that's what the change process is. And that's what we'll begin to talk about now. Change is inevitable. All projects are going to encounter change. Therefore, it's important that you have an effective change control system in place for your project. Because change is inevitable, it's important that you have a process in place to manage change. What does manage change mean? During our project setup, we spent countless hours defining a well-defined, clear, unambiguous project scope, and that project scope is going to define what it is our project delivers. Because change is inevitable, we need to ensure we have a process to manage the change to the scope. Every change in the project will in fact change your project scope, so we need to have a process to manage how those changes are done, to ensure that we have a process to manage and approve changes, and we need to ensure that all change is integrated into the total project. Again, if something changes, document the change, obtain approval for the change, and then integrate it into the total project plan. That means deal with the impact to the schedule. That means deal with the impact to the dollars. That means deal with the impact to the risk. That means deal with the impact to the team. Do you need a different complement of resources? Do you need to change team members' allocations to the team? It means integrating the change into each and every aspect of the project to ensure that the inevitable change is well managed and that the inevitable change is integrated into the total project. And everyone, the stakeholders, senior management, the acceptor, is aware of the impact of making change into the project and is aware of the impact of implementing the change on the schedule and on the budget for the project. How is that done? I'll show you a few techniques for doing that. As I mentioned, you must have a formal change process in place. You must document each and every change to an accepted, defined project situation. If it's a change to the scope, if it's a change to the approved to scope document, it must be documented through the change management process. If it's a change to an accepted deliverable, it must be documented through the formal change process. So what is that formal change process? To me, it's simplified down to having a project change request form, and this project change request form must be completed for each and every change. So requested change, what is the name of the change, the date of the change, and then specific justification why the business needs to change. Then the project will get the change request and they will go through and do an analysis of the change. What impact is this change going to have? How is this impact? What do we need to do to deal with this change on the project? The results of the analysis of the change is the project impact of change. What is the impact to the scope? What is the impact to the schedule? What is the impact to the budget? What is the impact to the risk? What other project impacts are going to be in place as a result of implementing this change? And then finally, and absolutely most importantly, is a formal acceptance of the change. The business sponsor must sign this off saying, yes, I agree to this change. I authorize Steve, the project manager, to go through and implement this change, which means a change in the approved deliverables. It means a change of 3 days to the project schedule, and it means a change of $5,000 to the project budget. By formally accepting this, you have documentation that the accepted change, or that the change has been accepted, and that the change is to be implemented into the organization. So what constitutes a project change? What warrants entering the information into the project request change form? The answer is all change. But it's a more defined answer than that. It's all change to an approved, signed off project fact. Once the scope statement is produced and signed off, any changes to the project scope must be documented through the change request process. Once a deliverable, the requirements definition document, once it's complete and signed off, any changes to that deliverable must be processed through the project change management process. If you're producing a final product, a bread box, go back to our bread box example, if you're producing a bread box, and once the bread box has been through prototype phase, and the business decides that 2 hinges on the bottom of the bread box hinge isn't enough, that they need 3 hinges, that is an approved project change. Any change to any approved, and that's the key, any change to any approved component must be documented through the change management process. This is in direct contrast to any discussion, any project involvement as part of ongoing delivery. As you're working on the requirements definition, as you're workshopping, as you're prototyping, as you're working towards the deliverable, and you institute change, you do revisions, you do enhancements, that's not change management material. That's ongoing routine project delivery. It's only once the deliverable is complete and only once the deliverable is signed off, then you institute the change management process. It's important that you understand this distinction. Change will happen daily as part of routine project delivery. You meet with the business, you conduct a workshop, you reach a conclusion, you document that in the minutes, you issue the minutes, people review the minutes and say, no, that wasn't my understanding of what we discussed, would like to make a change. That's not change request material. That's routine project work, that's routine clarification. Do not, please do not institute that as part of the change management process. Your change management log will be thousands long, and that's not where you need to be. Routine clarification, routine refinement is routine project work. Change request is only changes to approved, documented, signed off project artifacts. But if it is a change to a signed off project artifact, you must institute the change process. Why? Because you're changing an approved document. If you have signed off for the requirements definition document that in the current situation assessment you say the current flaws are A, B, and C. Therefore these flaws will be addressed in the go forward solution. That is what is approved, that is what's signed off. By contrast, if you have a change, somebody comes to you and says, you know what, B really isn't a flaw. B is the way the system should work. The person doing the reviewing didn't understand our true business situation. Please don't address B as a flaw. Please ensure that the B functionality is in the carry forward system. If you make that change without documenting it, if you introduce those changes without documenting it, and the final system goes into production, the final system is acceptance, and somebody recognizes that B is functioning or not function appropriately, they're going to come back and ask why this is. This is in contrast to this current situation assessment that I have documented from you that says B is a flaw, but yet you implemented B exactly like that. Why? And then, well, I seem to remember on such and such a date that you told me. No, that's not the way you need to be. If B is documented as a flaw in the requirements definition document and the business wants to change that, issue a change log that says on X date you issued a change that says business reason for change, B is no longer a flaw, analysis of change, business impact of change, final signature. That is your approval, that is your justification, that is your audit trail that warrants, that justifies, that validates whether or not B as a flaw is included into the final system. If it's on a document, if it's been signed off, if it's approved, that's what your project is obligated to deliver. If it's a change to that, don't take verbal confirmation. Verbal confirmation can be misinterpreted. Verbal confirmation can be forgotten. Verbal confirmation can come from the wrong person. They're not in an authority position to make the request. If it's a change to an approved, signed off document, it must be documented through the change management process, and it must be formally approved and accepted. And then it becomes part of your project baseline. This is critical. Applying change management is critical no matter what style of project you're delivering. If this is an in-house project using in-house resources, you still must adopt a policy of formal change management. You may not be able to get final acceptance because signatures are politically inappropriate in your organization, but you still need to create an email. You'll still need to have the audit trail that says, on this date, I sent you an email, and I have it in my sent mailbox, that says, according to the discussion with X, it's been agreed that B is no longer a flaw, and therefore B's functionality should be carried forward into the final system as is. Ensure that you're documenting all changes. My preference is you document all changes in something as formal as this change request log, and that this change request log is reviewed and approved and signed off. If that's not politically acceptable in your organization, then you do it through email, then you do it through documentation on your weekly status report, but you document these changes somewhere so that as people's mind changes or people question the interpretation, you have your documentation, you have your audit trail to validate why the change, why you've taken the action on behalf of the project that you've taken. Change request form is the critical part of our overall change management. But as I'm sure you can appreciate, you're going to get a large number, dozens, hopefully less than 100, but you're going to get a large number of individual change requests. Manage them individually is going to be a challenge. You need to create a simple log that's going to allow you to say, for change request number 1, which was remove B from current situation on today's date, the status is initiated, so that you can start to manage and understand exactly what the status is, where each change request is. Because some change requests will take a period of time. It was initiated by the business today. It's going to take a period of time, maybe 2 weeks, while the team reviews it. So when you assign it to the team, you change the status from initiated to under review. So the team is reviewing it, the team is understanding the impact, the team completes their impact assessment and completes that segment of the change request form, and we present it back to the business for acceptance. So it's pending acceptance. The business is going to review it. The business is going to say, yes, I accept this change, or no, I don't accept this change, in which case the status is going to change to approved, or the status is going to change to rejected. By having this change request log in place, a single page that you can refer to. Again, this is your project book talking again. The change request log is at the front of your book that says, somebody comes to you and says, what's the status of that change to remove B from the current situation assessment? You can flip it open and says, oh, that was initiated, or the last change request date was today, and the current status is it's under review by my team. Having the simple change request log in place provides a single piece of paper that allows you to manage, to understand, and to action specific change requests. If it's under review by the team, and it's been under review by the team for more than 10 days, it's time to take action and remind that specific team member that they need to get back to us. We need to understand what the ramifications of this change will be. If it's pending approval for more than, again, 10 days, it's time to get back to the business sponsor and say, you've had this change request outstanding for more than 10 days. The team needs to know the decision. The team needs to be able to move forward with the appropriate action on this change. As changes are approved on your project, it's important that you integrate the change. This means as each change is approved, you need to update the plan. You need to update the overall project plan. You need to add the extra work elements that are required to make the approved change, to ensure that the approved change happens on the project. When you update the plan, this will almost always, but not necessarily, update the project schedule. As you add more tasks to the plan, there's a strong probability that this is going to impact the project schedule, going to impact the project end date. You need to make those updates. You need to update the project budget. Are there extra costs associated with integrating this change? You need to update the entire project environment to ensure that the change is included. And then you need to report on the change. In your next status report, your next weekly status report, your next monthly status report, you need to inform all the project stakeholders that on today's date we integrated a new change. This new change resulted in a 3-day schedule change, and this new change resulted in a $5,000 increase to the project budget. We're not talking project overruns. We're not talking that the project is delivering 3 days late. We're not talking that the project is delivering 3 days over budget. We're telling everyone that our project officially approved end date is now 3 days beyond the last forecast end date as a result of the change. And we're telling everyone the project is now going to cost $5,000 more because of the approved change. We have updated the baseline. The baseline against which you are being measured as a project manager has been updated because we have integrated the change into our project itself. One final aspect of change management I would like to share with you. I believe you need to produce a minor change log for your project. What's a minor change log? Before I answer that, let's go back and review what change management is. Change management is the documentation of all changes on your project, all changes to approved documents, all changes to signed off artifacts on your project need to be documented through the change management system. But often many of these changes will be very small, very simple changes, often will require no budget impact for the project, often will require no schedule impact for the project. But they still need to be documented. Documenting these through the rigor of the change management process, where they must be documented, analyzed, reviewed, and approved, can turn your well-managed project into a bureaucratic nightmare. I would like to recommend you produce this minor change log where you say minor change number 1. The schedule impact is 0. The budget impact is $250. That's minor change number 1. Minor change number 2 has a schedule impact of 1 day and has a budget impact of $500, for example. By documenting these on the minor change log, you've made it very simple. You haven't had to involve extra team members. You actually haven't submitted this to the business sponsor for formal acceptance. You've simply said, today I identified minor change number 1. It was deemed to be a very minor impact, $0 or zero schedule, $250. I identified another minor change, but you are documenting them. You are getting them out there so they were visible. Now, this minor change log must be communicated. This minor change log must be shared with the business sponsor. The business sponsor must be aware of these minor changes. I would suggest you share this minor change log with your business sponsor on a regular basis. Probably monthly is my experience. Once a month, you would consolidate all of the changes so you have total impact. This month, the total impact has been 2.5 days. And this month, the total impact has been $1,450, for example. At the end of the month, you would consolidate all of the information. Again, we have a period covered. At the end of the month, you would consolidate all of the information, and then you would send it to your business sponsor for acceptance. So you're still following the principles of change management. You're still documenting every change. You're doing the analysis, although abbreviated, on the impact of the schedule change or the change. You're consolidating these over a period of time, and you are submitting them for approval. You're simply streamlining the process because you want to ensure minor changes are documented, minor changes are reviewed without adding so much bureaucracy to your project that people sense it's mired in change management as opposed to moving forward for successful project delivery. If you implement a minor change log, you need to have the minor change log process agreed to in advance with the project sponsor. The project sponsor needs to agree that any change that has a schedule impact of less than a predetermined number of days, maybe 5 days. So any change with a schedule impact of less than 5 days, and any change with a financial impact of less than, again, a predefined number, maybe it's $1,000, will be documented on the minor change log, and the minor change log will be consolidated and presented for review as a minimum on a monthly basis, or let's say you've had a really active month and the number of changes has accumulated that the impact of the minor change is greater than 10 days, and this is the net total impact of all of the minor changes is greater than 10 days, or the total impact of all of the minor changes is greater than $5,000, $10,000, whatever that predefined number is. So again, put together a minor change log, define the process you're going to use for the minor change log, get the agreement in advance that it can be submitted monthly or when it reaches the predefined threshold. Document all changes. Minor changes are going to the minor log. Significant changes are going to be documented through the regular process. And you have implemented a very well managed, a very well defined change process for your organization.
This concludes this nugget and this series of 2 nuggets on project scope management. This nugget was focused on scope management during the execution of our project. The previous nugget was focused on scope definition. In this nugget, our focus was on 2 areas: verifying the scope, ensuring acceptance, defining the processes that the project will follow to ensure that all deliverables are acceptable or accepted by the business unit. Part of successful project management is getting the project concluded. Getting the project concluded means getting the deliverables accepted. The other aspect we discussed in this nugget was controlling the scope, ensuring that all changes and the focus is on all changes to all previously approved project facts, deliverables, output, anything that the project has completed and has been approved. If we wish to make a change to that, it must follow proper project scope control processes through the change management process. And with effective change management in place, you are truly controlling your project, and you will truly move your project towards final acceptance.
This concludes our nugget on project scope management. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I thank you very much for watching.